2022 days. And then suddenly in 2025, you guys have been everywhere. During Berlin Blockchain Week, you opened your office, and then there was like an office opening party in Berlin. And now you really seem to be one of the larger players, whereas beforehand, you kind of had the fintech neo broker type of players like Scalable Capital and Trade Republic in Germany, where you couldn't really even buy crypto itself, but rather ETPs or ETFs. Then you had stuff like Bitpanda, but other than that, you only had the intercontinental exchanges like Coinbase and Kraken. And obviously, back in the days, you had Binance as well until they got a little more regulated and cracked down on NVU. So maybe let's start by giving a brief background about yourself. How did you find your ways into the industry, and how did you end up at Bitvavo?
Very happy to do so. So, as I said, my name is David. So I've been personally in the crypto space since 2018, 2019, I would say. Started from the investor perspective, and then got completely obsessed by the whole industry. So obviously had the very typical introduction to Bitcoin, then went into Ethereum, smart contracts, like how we all do it, right? And then I was so fascinated by the space that I wanted to work in it and push the narrative, right? Because I felt in this, I found myself more or less in this community again, right? Like I was talking to a lot of interesting personalities and characters that had very similar ideas of how the future of the internet should look like, right? And the future of money, and very similar ideas. And that's why I kept on pushing myself to work 100% in the space. So I started off at the Stock 3, which is a German, I would say the German Bloomberg terminal for the retail trader or investor. But was doing all sorts of business development and was onboarding a couple of crypto exchanges. Was responsible for content and started to reduce my times there, and started to work at a DeFi startup. We were basically doing a regulated yield product for crypto. That kind of got me completely fascinated by the whole space even more, right? And after this, it was quite similar to you, Max. So I didn't hear about Bitvavo like 2 years ago. I was quite unknown. So I had obviously my typical accounts with Kraken, with Binance, and so on. But yeah, when I first heard about Bitvavo, I was quite intrigued because, especially from a cost perspective, they were leading, especially in the European market, right? And the fact that it's a European player, it's also quite unusual, I would say, and that's why I think diving deeper into this matter, I was blown away by Bitvavo, by the idea of going a little bit the other direction, right? Of going the regulated path, the more forward-looking and more like, how do you say, a little bit more conservative, right? So it was very interesting for me now to see the decentralized exchange side. And yeah, Bitvavo since then is growing rapidly. And one of the reasons why you hear a lot about us at the moment is because of MiCA regulation, right? And since we got our MiCA license, we are now able to do marketing and approach clients all over Europe. And that's why you basically hear about Bitvavo more and more, not only at the Bitvavo, at the Berlin Blockchain Week, but also in football stadiums, for example. We do a lot of Bundesliga sponsorships. We're just trying to raise the awareness, because Bitvavo is an exchange and not a broker, and that's a massive difference, where we maybe can dive in deeper later. So,
Certainly.
Max,
Can you
here we go.
describe a little more what your role is like at Bitvavo? And
Yes.
given that you are a surprisingly large organization, like how is a centralized exchange like Bitvavo structured workforce-wise?
Yes. So basically, my position is business development manager. So basically, I'm introducing Bitvavo to Germany and the other way around. So on the one hand side, I focus on retail growth. On the other hand side, I do institutional introductions, trying to get us onboarded or basically connected to brokers, to banks who want to get crypto exposure. And yeah, how is Bitvavo set up? And maybe you can also tell a little story about Bitvavo. So it's really this Dutch success story. So it started in 2017, 2018 officially, and was basically a basement with like three guys coding and seeing the opportunity of creating a trading platform, a crypto trading platform. And I think it was with like every startup, with everything, right? Like a lot of luck was involved. That it was just the right timing with the right product, and we had a massive growth in the bull run of 2021. And since then, we grew to like now over 2 million retail customers in Europe. We are market leader in the Benelux, have around 50% of the Euro spot volume, which means like half of all the Euro crypto trades go through us. And yeah, now we have around 500 employees. It's quite it's a big number, but if you actually look under the hub, right, you see that there's so much needed, since we are available on iOS, we are available on Android, right? We have a massive regulatory department which is doing all the licensing, and we have the security and the cybersecurity department, marketing departments, and I think I think it's quite interesting. Well, a massive learning also from my perspective, how localized marketing efforts have to be in Europe, right? So that's a massive learning, right? Like even within Germany, I would say the people from the south have a little different mindset than from the north. So something that you cannot put like one campaign all over Germany. Like you have to really localize it. And yeah, since then we keep on growing, and at the beginning we focused quite on just handling the volume and make the trading experience quite seamless. And now we're also looking to adding new products, make it even more interesting. And from one of the reasons why I also put my personal funds now to Bitvavo is just mainly the cost perspective, because we really play the low cost game. So if you do volumes below 100K a month, you have 25 basis points trading fees. If you do a market order, if you do a limit buy or sell, so you add liquidity to the order book, you basically have a rough a fee of you have a fee of 15 basis points, right? So this is super competitive in comparison to some brokers here in Europe. And this basically comes with a German customer service, right, which is for the retail customer quite important, with very localized activities.
In retrospect, were you guys able to identify a clear edge, how you were able to compete and even in the EU market outcompete the much larger exchanges like Coinbase or Kraken? Was it primarily distribution driven? Did you have a regulatory advantage, a different set of features that they couldn't compete with, or is it purely on a cost basis, or what set you apart?
A couple of the topics, but like being European helps a lot, and also focusing on Euro. So I think it's quite an easy sell to say that we are European based. We focus on the Euro. Most other exchanges, they settle their trading on dollar. So there's bigger institutions. They don't really want to have this double currency risk. Then if you go deeper into the institutional landscapes, it's really that, for example, German institutions, they want to work with Germans, right? They want to have a German representative. They want to talk to a German, right? And if the offering in Germany is limited, right, then they see, hey, who else is out here in Europe? So they really focus here in Europe, and that's where we are placed just perfectly, or situated perfectly from this perspective. Then on top, obviously the regulatory topic, where we are just very focused and really focused on details. Because now, since both of the industries are merging more and more, right, it's so important that we have all the licenses that are basically required to do business in Europe. And the other part is simply the cost perspective. So within Europe, like within Europe, we have within the world, actually, if we talk about euro trading pairs, basically we have the deepest we have the deepest order books, we have the deepest liquidity.
Yeah, I remember that if you wanted to trade euro pairs on Kraken or Binance, they have a decent selection of them. Obviously, not as large as Bitvavo's, but if you move down the longer tail, liquidity is not really comparable to their US dollar equivalents. How do you view the centralized exchange competitive landscape in Europe right now? I still remember in the 2021 days, I personally perceived Bitpanda to be the most like local European, very distribution and marketing heavy player. I think that's also a point in time where it makes sense to go into the broker and exchange differentiation. But yeah, how do you view the competition and the landscape right now?
I mean, now with having Mika in place, right, you have the regulatory playing field now, where everybody can agree to. I think this the competition gets even bigger, right? So with a lot of the international players from the US, but also Asia, coming into the market, and I think you see it everywhere, right? Like you see it on social media, you see it on in sports games and so on. That all of the big players are trying to catch some market share in Germany, because we kind of forget that Germany is still the biggest economy in Europe, and mostly there's like if you like the approach is if you win Germany, you win Europe. That's what marketing geniuses say, right? And yeah, if we so the competition is still ongoing, and but you also saw that it's the landscape is also consolidating, especially with regulatory topics, right? So you have a couple players who have to move out of the market. Some are being merged, and yeah, so I think this is quite fair. The point for me is, the market is still growing, and that's why I think there's enough pie for everyone. But obviously, competition is good. And I completely agree with Bitpanda being all out with marketing. I think they're doing a really, really good job with doing great sponsorships and being present with many at many venues, basically. And I think it's also good for the German landscape in general, right? Because I feel like Bitpanda is it's quite an introduction to crypto in general, but once you focus a little bit more on actually the cost basis, then most people will understand that that just fees are simply higher at a broker setup. So many people are not like, maybe not your Degen followers or like your Degen listeners, right? But and for many retail customers, they don't really know what the difference is between an exchange and a broker. And it all really started. So what actually is an exchange, right? So an exchange in the traditional context is quite a members only club. So you had very high capital requirements. Only companies were able to allowed to trade on the traditional exchange until the people wanted to also participate in the growth of stocks, right? So that's why then brokers got introduced. So brokers basically a middleman, right? You don't need you have lower capital requirements. You have a normal like KYC process and so on, another KYB process on the exchange side. So always a middleman who basically then buys crypto or buys stocks from a broker, and then sells it to its customer. And the the broker versus exchange debate in the crypto context is quite similar, because it's a crypto exchange is a little bit of both. So like so for the first time, there's the possibility that you as an end customer can put a order into an order book of an exchange, right? Which is unheard of from the traditional side. And right, so it's almost that now a retail customer can become some sort of a market maker, right? Because you either take away liquidity from the order book, or you bring liquidity to the order book. So that also ends up being a differentiator in the fees. So basically, if you just do a simple market maker, a market order, you basically pull away liquidity from the exchange. If you do a limit order, then you basically add liquidity to the order book, which makes the exchange run more smoothly, have deeper books, right? And therefore you have a benefit as an exchange, right? And therefore the fees are lower. And once you get in touch with an exchange, right? So you basically the price is basically made by the market, right? And it's not made by the broker, who is your direct counterparty. With an exchange like us, we have market makers, we have institutional players, and we have retail players placing bids on both sides, on the sell and buy side, basically.
So basically, everybody's playing on the exact same playing field.
Exactly. And it becomes way more transparent, and yeah, and therefore also cheaper.
Is the whole payment for order flow, is that a thing that brokers do? I mean, it's a very well-known concept in the fintech and like neo broker, stockbroker field, but I'm wondering whether it's also a growing sector or revenue stream for players in crypto.
I think it always existed, right? Like there will be a little bit more there's more regulation coming up in, I think, 2026 regarding the payment for order flow. It has a concept that always existed and most likely will always exist, right? It's always I think like also going back to the broker with this exchange, right? So the broker is a very nice introduction, right? It's very user friendly. It's really focusing on it. But now, with being a little bit more digital and set up quite more thin as a tech company, you can also have those kind of benefits from a broker with an exchange.
Mm-hmm. Since you mentioned Mika quite a bit, and if I remember it correctly, most of the time I personally listened to podcasts, read articles around it was back in 2023 and 2024, I guess, when the entire package of legislation was drafted and people were wondering what is going to be included. Can you explain a little more to the audience what exactly it entails on the centralized exchange side? Because if I remember correctly, it's very complex, and it touches on stuff from DeFi to centralized exchanges to stablecoins. So basically, every niche within crypto. How does it particularly affect you, and how do you use Mika to build yourself a regulatory and competitive advantage?
Mm-hmm. So I'm not a legal expert, right? So I'm not so deep into the
No
regulatory
legal
topic.
advice on
No
this
legal
show.
advice, exactly. Also no financial advice, nothing. Yeah, but basically there are all sorts of different kind of Mika licenses. So if some players say they have a Mika license, it doesn't necessarily mean that they have some trading license. Maybe they just have a custody license. Maybe they have different things. But yeah, as I said, I'm not our legal expert, right? all I can say is that for the first time, right, I think Euro and also Germany has been quite forward thinking regarding this regulation, right? So it's basically it's for the first time that I think, or like one of the first times that we handled something quite proactive, and everybody can prepare for it. And now I think the only issue is that the bureaucratic hurdle now has to be also reduced. And I think then it's a really good regulatory package.
Does it enable you to offer any additional features, or does it restrict you from certain features? I still remember back in, it was July or August 2021, when I suddenly wasn't able to trade perps on Binance anymore. Before I could even like get started with that, I was quite excited for it when I just got started with crypto. Oh well, you can also use leverage, and then before I was even like able to use it, I got that notification from the app that they are not able to offer it within the EU anymore. Was stuff like that already related to Mika, or how does it affect the features that centralized exchanges are allowed
Yes,
to offer?
exactly. So Mika is one of the reasons. I know for a lot of leverage products, it always depends on what kind of products there are, but many of those are my securities, right? And then once you have securities, you need, Mika doesn't cover securities as far as from my knowledge. So basically, you need a MiFID 2 license to provide those features, right? And that basically then goes into another regulatory loop, right? So yeah, it's quite complex, right? I think it's also quite good. I think that we have those regulations in place, right, to really like. Obviously, like the focus is on protecting the end customer, right? And I think that's why some of the regulatory things are definitely useful.
Is there anything you think that is missing in Mika, or where you think it makes the life of industry participants disproportionately harder and it doesn't really serve a purpose?
As I mentioned, I'm not the Mika expert, right? So there's not much I can say to that. But I've heard from my like counterparties and also people in the sector, right? Like it basically tells you quite clear what you're allowed to do and what you're not allowed to do. So I think that's quite that's a good thing, right? So, but it can go deeper into this. I'm not a legal expert, right?
Yeah. Maybe to move on to user metrics, what do your current adoption metrics, daily active users, monthly active users look like? How do you function as a business? Where does your revenue come from? And also feel free to share your screen if you have any slides or a presentation about that.
I can just generally show you a little bit of like Bitvavo in a nutshell, basically. And then I can also screen. Here we go. If you can see my
Yes.
if you can see my if you can see my screen, so basically, yeah, but yeah, we have around 400 trading pairs, right? And we have a yearly volume of around 130 billion, right? So, and this comes from around 2 million customers. And the other one is basically what I mentioned. This is our market share overview. So here we can see that we have roughly 50% of the Euro spot volume, and then you have the other players, Kraken, Coinbase, Binance, Bitstamp, and OKX. We're also part of it. Generally speaking, like the trading field volume or like the trading activities, they have been quite have been going down. I think everyone has seen this in the market, right? Everyone has kind of felt it, that there's a little bit less activity. If we look at meme coins, for example, like meme coin trading volume is also at a all-time low. But we are still growing, right? So we're still growing every day in Germany. I think the the general market is still quite early, right? I think we are over this hurdle, or like over the thing where people don't know about it. At least everyone heard about this crypto thing, even if they don't really understand what's behind it. But that's at least something, right? And if you zoom out and see the institutional adoption, if you see all of the advancements with tokenized RWAs, or like real world assets, that's maybe a interesting side thingy, right? So instead of saying RWAs, if you're in a TradeFi, don't or if you talk to somebody in TradeFi, don't say RWAs, so real world assets, because RWAs are actually risk weighted assets, right? So you have to be a little bit more like, this basically the red flag for some of the TradeFi guys. So it's always good to say real world assets. We talk about the whole stablecoin topic, and I think it's the stablecoin topic is, I think, the easiest to understand for TradeFi, and I think that's where we see also a lot of movement happening. There's so many use cases for it, and I think that's one of the things where you have this deeper adoption, and where you see this deeper adoption in the crypto space.
I think it's interesting you mentioned that, like, the institutional landscape in Europe is also warming up towards crypto. Do you have a lot of institutional clients? And if so, what entities do they typically represent? Is it hedge funds, family offices? Is it banks that want to work with you? And like, what are their views, and like, what are the institutional like vibes towards crypto right now in Europe?
It's definitely like I think it's definitely waking up. I think we are away from the very techie, nerdy guys who try to explain this complex topic to somebody who has no idea. Now we are more leveling, right, on eyesight, and I think that's super nice. So for Bitvavo, basically we target brokers, where basically they can tap into our open order book, right? So we basically provide additional liquidity for the offering, but we can also talk to but we're also talking to banks. So we do this in all over Europe, basically, and yeah, just this is I would say our main target within Europe. And yeah, you see if you look to the US, you see already many advancements of like pension funds coming in, right? Of just more institutional adoption in general. And I think there are a lot of US trends that are coming to Europe, right? So I think Europe is a little bit behind sometimes, but we catch on many trends. And if you look how important the crypto topic is in the US, and also states basically buying Bitcoin for the treasury, I think that's a massive sign where I think like I believe personally that Europe and some of the players in Europe will definitely follow this lead. Still, if you look specifically into Germany, it's very conservative, right? So I think if you look at the general like investor landscape in Germany, right, we have around, I think, 13% between 18 and 64-year-old people who invested in crypto before, and I think we have roughly like 15% of the German population who bought stocks, right? So we come from a very conservative background where we focus a lot on security. Germans focus a lot of on insurances, for example. I think there's around 2 insurances per person in Germany. So super conservative, which is okay, but at some point, right? At some point, I think people need to open their eyes and see that you need to diversify your portfolio. Inflation is still, it's not at an all-time high, right? But inflation is there, and if you just put your money into your bank account and let it sit there, it's you're losing the value.
I would assume that most of your customers also from Germany are from our generation, maybe a little bit older. Do you even in this generation, which I would consider culturally very globalized, or at least within the Western hemisphere, pretty much very homogeneous, would you still say that there's a very different user behavior of European and particularly German users if you compare it to the user base of US exchanges? I mean, obviously, it's hard to
Mhm.
make the direct comparison because you are pretty much exclusively focused on Europe and you don't have the US counterpart to compare. But maybe in conversations with other centralized exchanges, you've been able to yeah, get to some comparisons there, or yeah.
Yeah, so not really in numbers. This will be more like a shot from the hip, right? From the conversations I had, and I mean, even within Europe, the investor landscape differs incredibly, right? So I think even here, like I'm now here in Amsterdam, in our headquarter, from Bitvavo, we have the Dutch who are way more open to investing in general. Like many people heard about crypto, they're all in stocks, and if you look to the US, for example, the 401k, the retirement funds basically for every American, like that's already more sophisticated what we have here in Germany, right? So I think that basically represents um, quite quite the few, right?
Mhm. Are there any specific tokens or sectors within crypto where you see that the European crowd is either disproportionately interested or which they completely neglect?
That's a good question. So I think DeFi is obviously super interesting, right? And I think more and more people are actually starting to understand the use cases. But I think one of the major issues is just it's a generational. I think it's simply a generational topic where it doesn't really yeah. What I've seen, for example, in my talks is like um, it's so important to talk on one level, right? And if you talk to a banker who is in his late 50s, has seen a lot, and you come along as a 30-year-old crypto guy, it's super difficult. So we're starting to have more and more OG TradeFi guys who like go into the topic, who read about it, educate themselves, and then make a move to crypto, to DeFi, or like centralized exchanges. So you see more and more of this move, and then you basically level out the playing field, or like because you speak the same language, and I think that's one of the major issues that we have in the crypto industry, that we still don't speak the exact same language, right? And we're very technical focused, whereas like I think we slightly discussed this the other day that um, it's yeah it's like I'm not aware, or have no idea how the tech behind Mastercard works,
Mm.
right? I have no idea what's very limited idea basically on how the internet works, right? But we are still speaking about what is a blockchain, what is really behind it. Most people, they simply don't care, right? They use credit cards because it's an easier way to use cash. They're going to use crypto because it's one level up, right? And that's always the thing I say, like we're not bringing the solution to all of the evil. We don't bring the solution of all of the problems we have on the earth, but it's basically just one level up, one one step further to make our world, or like the structure, or like the infrastructure more efficient, right, and a little bit more democratic. And so that's what I think.
Mm. I've always perceived the German crypto bubble as quite a weird one. I think we have a disproportionate percentage of Bitcoin maxis, and then there's also, I don't know if they're still around, but back in the days there was quite a large Cardano crowd, and IOTA was also, weirdly enough, a German thing. I never found Germans to be very avid of DeFi. Maybe Hyperliquid changed that a bit. We a few weeks ago had a first Hyperliquid Germany meetup in the Web3 Hub in Berlin, and I think that was very well populated and well attended. So some of the names if you're active in the Hyperliquid ecosystem are actually based here or in another German city, which I find very positively surprising. But also given your connections to the TUM Blockchain Club and the Frankfurt School, where maybe you have an insight into the tomorrow of what is being built or what people are looking to build within the industry, how do you view the builder landscape of the European continent in crypto right now? You can focus on Germany or Europe overall, depending
I'm
on.
happy to focus on Germany first, right? So what we have a event space in Berlin in the Web3 hub, right? We chose this location because it's very crypto focused, right? Like we have many builders there. We wanted to place ourselves there where there's a lot of decision makers and also multiplicators, right? Like most of the most of the guys who are actually in crypto, right? They have a network, they have a big family, they have their friends and family basically who they influence, right? And that's why we made this decision of going to Berlin with our event space. I'm personally based in Munich, but currently also quite often in Frankfurt. So I think, obviously Frankfurt is still the financial hub in Germany, even in Europe, I would say. And there's obviously no way around the Frankfurt School, right? So Frankfurt School, they did a good job. They are still continuing and doing a good job and bringing basically TradeFi people and general landscape more into the crypto space. Since I'm based in Munich, right, we have quite a deep collaboration with the TUM Technical University of Munich, and those guys they're just amazing. They're builders, right? They're very tech focused. That's what the TU Munich stands for. So I think it's incredibly important, right, to bring this topic into universities, to bring this topic to start quite early, right? Because I truly believe it. Like it is happening right now. This adaptation, right, and in all sorts of our life. Even though sometimes the current pricing doesn't really mirror this, right? But behind the door is actually there's a lot of adoption happening, people joining, and so obviously so that's why I'm a big fan of those universities actually providing courses and information to students early on.
Are there any projects that are based in Germany or Europe which you, either from Bitvavos or also from your personal perspective, you find particularly interesting? I think on the DeFi side of things, there are quite a few relevant players in France. I think Morpho is the largest example, and some of the other ones have like employees spread across. London is very heavy when it comes to the US exchanges hopping over to Europe and more of the financialization, tokenization, and VC fund landscape. But I couldn't pinpoint a very crypto native project, which I know very well, which I'm certain of that is based in London. But back in the days, the Crypto Valley in Zug was obviously a much more relevant player. It's still a key location for a bunch of the foundations. Berlin played a very big role in the deep tech space where you had a bunch of early Ethereum, early Cosmos people here, but right now it doesn't really feel like there's a shining star on the DeFi and crypto sky that is Germany or Europe based.
I completely agree. Also couldn't pinpoint a player that is really going through the roof. I think it's just like one of the major issues is simply the bureaucratic topic, right? Like we're quite digital native, right? For if I work on a laptop from Europe or somewhere else, like why it doesn't really make a big difference, right? So I'm I'm choosing the one that's easiest on me from a tax perspective, that's easiest on me from a bureaucratic perspective, and who's supporting startups, right? And also from my personal experience, working in DeFi, it was a nightmare, right? Like to set up something in Europe. I'm not saying it's not possible, but it's it's definitely more difficult than somewhere else.
What's your outlook into 2026 markets-wise for Bitvavo and generally how the crypto landscape is going to move forward?
Right, this is my personal view, right, and this is no financial advice on this topic, and I think it's super difficult to say how 2026 goes. If you remember looking at we thought October is coming, right? Do we see a end of the year rally? Like what is happening to all of this? Like all of the traditional metrics are basically not really happening anymore. So I basically I just see it from a adoption perspective, and I see this is continuously growing. That's why there's more volume coming in, but there's like the impact what this volume and the new users will have short term is super difficult, right? We are also talking about I mean, we're talking a big. I personally think there's a we're in the bubble space when we talk about AI, right? So this couldn't have a massive effect also on all other industries, including crypto. So for most, generally speaking, crypto is still a very risky asset. So once the market goes down, usually liquidity goes from the risky assets first, right? So it's very and that's what I'm saying. Like it's quite difficult to pinpoint this. I'm not sure what, for example, like is a Nvidia worth 2 trillion? Is it worth 4 trillion? What is even the difference? I really don't know, right? So it's very, very difficult for me to pinpoint it. But I see it from a perspective from Bitvavo, and we're continuously growing. We are opening up now to all European markets, and we are basically pushing the crypto narrative into everyone's home. So that's why I generally think there's it's going to be 100%. It's going to be volatile, but I'm bullish looking forward.
Do you agree with the thesis that there's a decent chance that crypto as an industry, while getting more adoption day by day, as an isolated industry is actually going to decline and take more of a backseat? It's somewhat similar to the internet. I mean, every restaurant, every like street corner shop has a website, but if I'm a restaurant and I put my menu onto the internet, I'm not an internet company, I'm still a restaurant. So fintechs or banks that are using blockchain tech for their settlement, for tokenization, or for the issuance of their instruments, they still remain a bank and they don't necessarily have a token. So while the industry has arguably been growing in 2025 exponentially more than any year before when it comes to actual capital inflows and relevant players integrating the technology, there has probably never been a year where less value actually accrued to the underlying native crypto assets.
Yeah. Generally speaking, I would say yes, but I think there are a couple of use cases which we are not aware of, right? I think there's still things where we think like there's space for development. I completely agree. Just because you put blockchain on something or AI on something doesn't mean it's AI or blockchain in it. What the actual value is behind it. I think it's all about utility, right? Like I think it's also similar to the NFT market. Yes, is there value behind NFTs? 100%, right? Like once you have utility for something, then all of a sudden you have something, but then you have value accrual. But just because you have some sort of NFTs doesn't mean that it will fly because of this, right? So because then you can also just have PDFs or whatever, right? So I think I think from what you said, right, it's definitely, I think that the market is really being filtered out, and I think I think from the internet times, right? You had an Amazon, you had a Facebook, you had all of those companies also coming out. So you definitely will have a couple of winners that are using this tech, but yes, many. I think meme coin is going to be it's going to be a difficult one, right? Yeah.
Perhaps one last side quest to dive into before we hit the hour. Over the past months, there has been a lot of questions and like frustration around the listing processes of various centralized exchanges, particularly in the context of Binance. I think there have been some cases where they have either received 5 or even up to 10% of the total token supply. I think Scroll was one of the cases, and then like a bunch of other projects. And yeah, just to, if you can share any details, how does the listing process of tokens work at Bitvavo, particularly because you guys are one of a few exchanges who have euro pairs also for the longer tail of DeFi tokens and anything else that's out there.
Yeah, 100%. So obviously I'm not part of the listing of the listing team, right? But we have a couple experts in the listing teams who basically scan the market, see certain kind of trends, and then either approach projects directly based on the market sentiment, right? And and we see where there's a certain kind of traction. But the listing process is quite simple. So there's just a simple listing form on our website. Maybe you can I can provide this to you later on if there's some interesting projects, and it's a simple filling out the form. We are MiCA regulated, right? So it's like from a regulatory perspective, all we can do is being done. We're doing this as transparent as possible, right? But I think more details can one of my listing colleagues then mention.
Very nice. Are there any topics you'd like to cover? Any other questions that remain unanswered?
No, I think keep building, right? I think it's always, I think generally speaking, it's always important that we zoom out and look at the bigger picture, and we are really building the financial future, right? Which I think is an incredible motivation, and it also keeps me passionate about the space, because I think we truly do something good for tech and good for the industry, not the crypto industry, but good for the financial industry as a whole, right? And I think from all the turmoil, from all the volatility in the market, I think it's really important to just come back to the basics and say, why are we actually doing this? And I think this is that gives quite a lot of motivation again, and I think this is something that we shouldn't forget with all the craziness that's happening.
I agree. While there's certainly like a lot of cynicism to be had about the industry and all the stuff that is going on, and there are difficulties to monetize certain things, even though they are useful on a technical side. I still think that the rage quitting we've seen on crypto Twitter over the past weeks might not be the most risk adjusted play going forward. So thanks a lot for coming on, David. Where can people find you? Where can people find Bitvavo? How can they sign up?
Quite simple. Maybe we can also post some sign up link. At the moment, we also
Sure.
do have like a 50 euro new customer code going on. So I think that's quite nice to just test our app, test our product. And yeah, just go to our website, click around. I think that's the easiest one. And for me personally, like if somebody's interested, yeah, you can reach me on either Twitter, LinkedIn with my name, or Telegram. So I'm quite flexible. Looking forward to some questions or any other requests that are coming.
Very nice. Thanks a ton for coming on, David. It was a very nice conversation, and I think our audience now knows a lot more about the European centralized exchange landscape.
Appreciate it, Max. Thanks so much.
Have a good one.